we've sort of talked about some of the pieces of each of these. When we think about deployments, where do we actually start to deliver SDN in network capabilities today? How do we make those steps? Right now, we're in an environment that typically networks are pretty fixed function. We're talking about all the way going out to craft help to actually make changes in the network. It's a long-term process. We think about how you actually implement SDN and the deployment capabilities. That starts to create some challenges. And so how do we go about actually integrating that? What are those steps moving down the road to deployment?
From a carrier perspective, I would say there's a lot of steps between here and actual live deployment. I mean, as you look at the number of SDN functionalities that are still very much in a test function. You look at the comments directly coming from carriers publicly about the complexity of managing an SDN network and the new challenges that come up with that. And again, privately talking to carriers and directly asking on a I won't say who said it basis, when is this going to be in the field customer facing? And no one's really has a hard number on in the immediate future, which is not, or not in a large scale productized type nature. Now, internally using it and applying specific NFV and SDN features is out there, but as a network-wide capability, it seems like there's a long road between here and there.
Especially in the service provider space.
Yes.
We've got some great use cases that have seen a lot of press with Google and Facebook, but there aren't a lot of Google and Facebooks out there who have the ability to control their entire environment and manage it. You've got the ability to do some flexibility, but the question is how far and how fast. Actually, Tim, I know you've actually had some hands-on experience.
I have, and I'd like to use that segue that you talked there about Google and Facebook. I wanted to share an article I actually read yesterday, so I made a few notes so I wouldn't mess it up. But what I like about this article is what Facebook has started is they announce it's called OCP. It's called Open Compute Project. And what's really good about it is what they're trying to do is they're fighting Cisco, which I guess I can say it since it's in the article, 23 billion, that's with a B, 23 billion on the Ethernet switch market. So what's good about OCP, they have this function called Wedge. And part of it, what it does, it creates us, we'll call laymen, people that are smart. They can all go in there and they can see what everybody else did. So somebody could invent something and you could see how they invented it, and then you could actually make it better, or you could do redesign. And then actually once you design it, you can send it to a manufacturer and they can build it. Now you might say, well, I don't really know how good that is. It's really good because you have other smart people. You might miss the piece. Well, you saw somebody did it, then you can do better on that. Mark Zuckerberg, the CEO, actually used this program and has saved, Facebook $1 billion because what you can do, and they're utilizing the SDN plane because they're actually taking technology. I think, in my opinion, SDN, what we're trying to do is take away from proprietary, like Simon was saying, everything's baked into the network and you can't see it. What SDN is pulling that out so we can see it and we can utilize it.
I'll add something to that.
Oh, by all means, dive on in.
It exists as a concept, but it requires implementation and execution in order for it to actually have any value. So we have two opposing interests. So the old guard carriers that are the walled gardens that have kept everything inside, and then let's use Tim's example here, the Facebooks of who have really a vested interest in building a network on top of infrastructure that's open that gets to, as Fedor said, the consumer, which is more of an NFV part, but without getting back into the whole SDN versus NFV. So we understand this. And a couple years ago, it's been 2 years now, Tim, the SNAP?
Yes.
2 years ago, Tim and I launched the SNAP, the Southeast Network Access Point, which is an SDN-based internet exchange in Atlanta at 55 Marietta Street. And we did that with the help of some of our friends, Brian Savory over here and Georgia Tech, Ron Hutchins, who's the CTO. And we created a platform where an internet exchange actually has an SDN control plane where everybody can have their own VM and they can spin up their own rule sets for peering. And that's in and of itself a direct implementation that allows the R&E community and some of the other folks that they play with, like the Genie project, which if you're not familiar with it, go look it up. It's backed by Raytheon and BBN, and they're doing all sorts of new development at levels that carriers can't even support. So we host this on this layer 2 Ethernet switch, a Brocade MLX16 down in Atlanta. But we didn't stop there. We actually understand something about development cycles. And a lot of times in service providers, the development cycle is internal. They bring it into their lab and they think about what they want to do and how long it's going to take them to do the implementation. And when they want to roll it out, not only as a service, but as something that would be interoperable with other networks. And that's the real key. How long is it going to take to get to that point? Because the promise of SDN really happens at the open source level when you can have the apps that interoperate. But a lot of carriers are concerned about that because that could be an impact to revenue, and you don't want that to happen too fast because you got to sort of protect the old and so on. But we also understand that the folks that want this to happen need an economic incentive. So we went on out ahead and got the Snap to become a direct access point for Amazon, AWS. So it's an AWS direct access point in Atlanta. And for those of you that don't know what that is, if you use EC2, Elastic Compute for storage and processing, in Amazon, and they have their 2 data centers in Ashburn and up in Seattle area, most of that's accessed via the public internet. So for those of you that are following the news, the public internet isn't the safest place to be anymore. Doesn't seem to be any rules or a sheriff. So everyone's trying to get away from using the public internet. Not internet protocol, but the public internet. So a direct layer 2 Ethernet connection's been made between the Amazon data center, where all the servers and the compute and storage sit, and the Snap. And Amazon has already created a product, service, pricing model that incentivizes people to do this. Generically speaking, when you're using AWS over the public internet, it's 12 cents per gigabyte. 12 cents per gigabyte. But if you come to them over a direct connect link, they only charge you 2. So the amount of money that's saved by entities that are using AWS, which, by the way, a lot are. Did you see their numbers last year? Like, unbelievable. Now, all these entities that are just getting started or starting to ramp up can do this through a direct connection on a layer 2 switch, and the incentive for them to connect and peer is already baked in. Now, what does that do? I call it Palmolive. Anybody remember that commercial? Every time I bring it up, people are like, "You're dating yourself." Yeah. He said, "Is it mild?" It's more than mild. You're already soaking in it. Oh, wow. I'm already doing it. So if you get them to connect to the switch, they're already in an SDN environment. So you're bringing them in to connect to AWS to save them money, and you're building out this community where now SDN applications can be developed, and you've already got a group of people that are sitting there, and you can say, "Hey, you want to try this? You want to try this? You want to try this?" Because it's so new and so radical, and people are so predisposed to being wired to say, "Well, I'll sit here and wait for the carrier to tell me what I'm going to buy and when I'm going to buy it." This is the new mentality, which is the Facebook approach. Just do it. And the Facebooks of the world need people like us in the infrastructure world to build the infrastructure that they can use and everybody else can use so that they can just do it. Otherwise, there's gatekeepers that keep us from being able to just do things. And that's why we treat things as real estate and neutral. So anyway, it's already happening is the short answer. It just depends on where you look and who you're talking to.
So is that something today that's sitting under the covers for services? I mean, right now, we know there are a couple large carriers that have started to do some significant deployments. Mm-hmm. Deutsche Telecom, yep. And what wound up being a greenfields rollout.
NTT. Probably
NTT.
The best example in the whole world, and they were the first V6 deployment globally, every node. And I give them a lot of credit for doing that. And they're smart to be first, because they'll already be there when everybody else shows up, and they'll already have all the experience. And they know that it drives efficiency, which reduces cost, and then it gives them the opportunity to create new applications or let anyone on the network create applications, which just drives the underlying need for their own service and infrastructure. So it is happening, but how many entities are there currently interoperating with each other at the control plane layer? That's a whole other question.
So you talked about the ability within Snap to be able to automate capabilities and spinning up new services. Yep. Is that something, I mean, we've had some level of automation in exchanges to date. It's not something that's, as a concept, is wildly new. But with SDN, there's now the ability to extend that automation control directly out to the end users in the exchange.
Yeah.
What do you do to help smooth that transition to be able to build engagement, so to open that up, because it is a new step for most folks. Most enterprises aren't yet to a point at which they could even think about, not waiting around for the carrier to say, hey, circuit's up.
It's like Allied Fiber. We build a neutral platform at the physical layer, real estate. And you're right, it's such a new concept for so many of them that they don't know how to sort of understand it quite yet. So the service providers, the carriers, they get it because they've been riding on this infrastructure for a long time. And by the way, as Jamie said, the squeaky old tricycle, it needs a new set of wheels and some WD-40. So we represent that nationally speaking, but on a regional and local level, there are facility operators like Colo, ATL, and Atlanta that provide that environment that will allow the enterprise networks to come in and establish a presence and get connected to an Allied Fiber system on a national basis and do their own thing. They've never really had the ability to do it on a national fiber basis, but they weren't at the point where they knew how to or the need. If you look at application growth and traffic growth and the need for performance and the need for avoidance of net neutrality issues, that requires physical infrastructure in order to be independent, and now they're realizing it, and that's why we're all sitting here and things are going really well in the industry now.
I'd like to jump on that question real quick about the SNAP. For me, and I think for all of us, just like we're doing here, it's about education. And how are we trying to help folks? Like Hunter was mentioning education, everybody understands money. If you're paying 12 cents opposed to 2 cents, that's a big difference, especially if you're doing a terabyte, not a gigabyte. So what I've had the honor of doing, Georgia Tech's my alma mater, and Mr. Savers from there as well. So with the CTO, Ron, what I bought the Brocade switch that Hunter mentioned. So it's kind of a sandbox, I like to call, for R&D, the R&D community. That's research and design. These are all the schools. Now, the one thing was unbeknownst to me, being a tech student, I'm like, oh, we don't like Auburn, we don't like Georgia and all that. But apparently, in this SDN internet world, they're all buds. And they all talk to each other, and they all do computing. I think Hunter touched on it earlier. Folks, they want to build new things, but they all like do it by themselves because they think they're going to make the next, I'll call it the Kentucky Fried Chicken recipe, and they don't want anybody else to know so they can make money. But in the R&D community, they all share. So this is a big thing for them, and that's why I wanted to start it at my facility. Awesome. And what we're trying to do is, on the SDN platform, you can go and order a cloud service in one day. One day it's up. But then you say, oh, I want to change to a different network. Well, now you got to call somebody. We'll call it a carbon-based individual, which I think SDN is going to replace. So all of a sudden, they're like, well, they give you this, it's going to cost money, and then, it's going to take us 30 days. And I'm sitting there going to take 30 days to flip a switch? Yes. So what we're trying to do is educate people. What we want to do is you can order the service. We're going to give you the enable control, which is why Georgia Tech's in there trying to figure this out, how to do it, because you could do it instantaneously, and we call it instantaneous gratification. You could be with NTT, and then you're like, well, I don't like NTT today. I want to go to CenturyLink. And that's what I'm trying to do at SNAP, and bringing in more schools and let other people know that this is an opportunity. But I'll go back to my original thing and be quiet. It's educating the individuals about what we have, because SDN can be spread out so many different ways. But that's what we're doing at SNAP, to help the schools talk to folks, and everybody else can talk to folks. Like Hunter was mentioning, it's not over the internet, it's over the exchange.